Welcome to Discovering the Ancient Paths. I am Pastor Mark Biltz of El Shaddai Ministries. We meet every Saturday morning in Tacoma, Washington from 10 a.m. to 12:30. One of the most exciting things we do is to look at the New Testament through the lens of the culture during the very days of the Messiah. We also go through the Torah, or the first 5 books of Moses, throughout the entire year, dividing it into 52 sections, so over the year, all 5 books are covered. Remember after the resurrection, on the road to Emmaus, how the disciples' hearts were burning as Jesus opened up the Old Testament to them in ways they had never seen. That's what we do every week. Join us on the journey of your life right here at El Shaddai Ministries, meeting every Saturday morning right here in Tacoma, Washington from 10 a.m. to 12:30. We'll see you there. In this Torah portion, it's called Beshelach, which means when he sent. This is when Pharaoh decided he is going to kick all of the Jews and the mixed multitude out of Egypt. And then, of course, he changed his mind. We have the crossing of the Red Sea. And then, following the crossing of the Red Sea, this weekend is known as Shabbat Shira or Shirat Hayam. What it is the crossing of the sea. Can you imagine what it would have been like? Here, it's late. It's probably around midnight. You got the sea in front of you, and Pharaoh's coming with the chariots. And then all of a sudden, what happens? The water splits. And then there's this fire keeping the Egyptians back, and all of you get across. And it says that, then in the morning, what happens as the Egyptians are through the Red Sea, all of a sudden Moses, what does God say? Stretch forth your hand! And he stretches forth his hand, and all of the water encompasses them. And in the morning it says they look, and their enemy is not to be seen. Can you imagine? How many of you have ever been terrified? And, after you've been terrified, if all of a sudden you have a miraculous redemption, you're just, hallelujah. Well, that's what was happening. So let's take a look. Of course, then what also happens, we have manna falling from heaven for the very first time. Can you imagine bread falling from heaven? We're going to talk about that. And then the Torah portion ends with a dramatic story of Amalek's attack. If it's not the Egyptians on one side of the Red Sea, we have Amalek on the other side. So we're going to look there. Let's start with Exodus chapter 12, though, from last week's Torah portion, verse 34. It says, the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading troughs being bound up in their clothes on their shoulders. All right, so here they are. They've loaded up the wagons with all of the goods from Egypt. And here they've got on their shoulders what they can carry. I mean, they don't have a whole lot of possessions, but they've got their little knapsacks and their dough, their bread on their shoulders. So they're walking, they're carrying, they're marching off to the Red Sea. And then let's jump now to Exodus 13, 17 through 19. It says, it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go. God led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. Okay, that's talking about the Gaza Strip, right up in that direction. It says, for God said, lest peradventure the people repent when they see war, and they return to Egypt. But God led the people about through the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up harnessed out of the land of Egypt. Let's stop there for a minute. Okay, so who's the people? And it mentions, it says, and the children of Israel. So you got, kind of a subset. You got the people, and within that, there's a subset called the children of Israel. Well, what's fascinating, it says the people might repent when they see war. That was not necessarily referring to the Jewish people. It was referring to the mixed multitude. The reason why is when it says they went up harnessed out of the land of Egypt, that meant the children of Israel went up prepared militarily. They went up ready for war, but God was concerned the people, which would be mostly the mixed multitude are coming with them, are going to be terrified when they see war that's coming, and here Israel's ready for war, and so they return to Egypt. Follow along here. It goes on to say that Moses also took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had straightly sworn to the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you will carry up my bones away with you. Now, we know that God, when he spoke to Abraham a couple hundred years earlier, he says his children would leave Egypt with great treasure. Genesis 15:14. I will judge the nation whose servants they are, and they will come out from among them with what? Great wealth. Well, guess what? The great treasure was just not the gold and silver the Jews took with them. The great treasure was actually the remnant of the Gentiles. And God did not want them to repent of their repentance and go back to the world, go back to Egypt. It was the mixed multitude. When the verse says the Israelites emptied out Egypt, this is in Exodus 12:37, it doesn't just refer to the gold and the silver. The Israelites emptied out Egypt of every person who had any redeeming spiritual value. Egypt was left both physically and spiritually bankrupt. Isn't that amazing? Exodus 14, verse 1 and 2. So the Lord speaks to Moses, and he said, speak to the children of Israel, that they turn back and encamp before Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, before Baal-zephon. Over against it you will encamp by the sea. And Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, they're entangled in the land, and the wilderness has shut them in. Okay, a couple of fascinating things about this verse. Baal-zephon means God of the north. All right? Now we know from the plagues, from the story in Exodus, God, his whole purpose was to destroy all the gods of Egypt, right? Well, they say he destroyed all of them up to that time except for Baal-zephon, the God of the north that they trusted in. Why did he not destroy them? Because he wanted them to be deceived, and so they would come after them. And so what happened is all of a sudden Pharaoh finds out that they're trapped, but actually God did that on purpose. And he thought, hey, the God of the north is going to give us the victory. Let's go get him. And it was at that time, after that, that God destroyed the God of the north. In Exodus 14, 11 through 13. Can you imagine, how many of you would like to have been a member of Israel during the time of the plagues? Who'd want to be part of Egypt during the time of the plagues? But can you imagine seeing all the miracles that took place, and then you see the Red Sea split. You go through, and you've got all the great wealth of Egypt and all these people following you, and then it collapses upon them. How many of you would be thankful? And yet, as I've said before, so often we forget the good things done for us, but we never forget the bad thing that one person did. I'll always remember the bad person. I'll always remember that horrible deed they did to me. 20 years from now, I'll remember that evil thing. But you can't remember the good thing someone did for us a month ago. That's human nature. Look at this in Exodus 14, verse 11 through 13. They say to Moses, is it because there's no graves in Egypt you've taken us away to die in this stinking wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Isn't this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. Man, I tell you what, this sounds like socialism. They totally forgot about their kids being killed, thrown into the Nile River, turning to blood. And how quickly they forget, and they're more concerned about the leeks and the garlics and the onion the government gave them. Life doesn't change. And we see Moses. It says, he says to the people, after they're whining and complaining, they're about to die as they think from the Egyptians and the chariots coming. Moses says, fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you will never see again. So here we go. We got the picture of the sea, and then it splits. So let's go back here. Here's the sea. Can you imagine? That's what you're facing. And it's a full moon because it's on the 14th, 15th, roughly right in there. And then what? Did anyone remember the story? What happened? God, look at this next verse. This is interesting. Exodus 14, 15 through 17. The Lord says to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the children to do what? What does that tell us? Sometimes it's time to pray, and sometimes it's time to shut up and do something. There's nothing wrong with praying. I'm all for prayer. But sometimes God is saying, hello, I'm trying to answer your prayer, but you got to help here. I'm not going to do this all myself. And they say Nachshon, who was the prince of the tribe of Judah, he was the first one to go forward. He jumped into the Red Sea, and as minute that he did something and went forward, that's when the sea split. How often God is waiting for us to take action before he works, but instead we sit and wait. We've got to understand that concept. And then look at this. This is amazing. The Lord said to Moses, why are you crying to me? Speak to the children of Israel. They go forward, but lift up your hand and do what? Stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, and the children of Israel will go on dry ground through the middle of the sea. That's the big miracle. I tell you what, the water's gone, but if you have all of these wagons that are heavy, loaded with gold and silver, you know how much that weighs, plus all their goods, and they're trying to get these wagon wheels through muddy ground and get to the other side, they're going to get stuck, break down. No, the miracle is, even though it was the bottom of the sea, they go on dry ground. And then all of a sudden, when Egypt brings their chariots, what happens? It turns back to mud. See, there's a big miracle going on here. And then look at this. God says, behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will go in after them, and I will get my honor over Pharaoh and over all of his armies and over his chariots and over his horsemen. And so what happens? Moses stretches out his hand, and here they all come, and they have their knapsack on their shoulders, or they're carrying it. Everybody's running through the Red Sea on dry ground. Now, here's what's amazing. You have Passover on Nisan 14. Then you have the Feast of Unleavened Bread that's 7 days long. The first day, the 15th, is a Sabbath. The last day is also a Sabbath. Passover's not a Sabbath, but the day after is a Sabbath. Well, guess what? It was on the day after that they left, and they're walking on the Sabbath. And they've got the burdens on their shoulders on the Sabbath. And guess what? The last day, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, is a Sabbath. And guess what? It even says within Jewish history that they crossed the Red Sea on the Sabbath. So amazing that the Sabbath was a time to bring not only spiritual redemption, physical redemption, and healing and everything. We know their shoes didn't wear out. Everything went great. But it was on the Sabbath that Moses stretched forth his hand and allowed them to cross the Red Sea. Salvation. Now, in every Torah scroll, I don't have it turned to this one. I probably should have it turned to that one. This is the song at the sea. They could have done that in English, but they didn't. But it looks like you have a wall of water on each side, and it's like there's lines and rows of Jews running through the sea. That's what this is to be set up as. And it is the song at the sea you find in every Torah scroll. Now, let's look at, let me see where I'm at here. Okay. So let's go to Exodus 14, 19 through 22. Here it says, the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them. A pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them. It came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel, and there was the cloud and darkness, yet it gave light by night, and one didn't come near the other all night. And what did Moses do? Stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all the night and make the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. The children of Israel went into the midst of the sea, again, on dry ground. This is the emphasis all through here. The waters were a wall to them on their right and on their left. Now look at verse 26 to 29. What does the Lord say to Moses? Stretch out your hand over the sea that the waters may come again on the Egyptians, on their children or chariots and horsemen. And so what did Moses do? stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its strength when the morning appeared. The Egyptians fled against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the middle of the sea. The waters returned, covered the chariots, the horsemen, the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them. But the children of Israel walked on what? Dry ground in the middle of the sea, and the waters were walled to them on the right hand and on the left hand. Now what's amazing is the same God who brought judgment also brought life. On the same day, on a Sabbath at that, God brought destruction upon the Egyptians through the Red Sea, but at the same time he brought life to the Israel on the Sabbath as they crossed through the Red Sea. As the Egyptians had a disregard for human life by throwing babies in the water, now they meet their end in the water. The hard-hearted Egyptians were destroyed. Okay, so how many of you know the whole thing about Pharaoh and the Egyptians is their hard hearts? I don't know if you know, but like out of the 10 plagues, 8 of the plagues, God told Moses, stretch forth your hand. How many of you know the Jews have been keeping Passover for 1,500 years before Yeshua was born? All right? Every year they have their Passover Seder. They read about hard-hearted Egyptians. They read about Moses stretching forth his hand about 10 times, okay, with the plagues. They know that phrase. Now in Exodus 15, 1 and 2, it says, then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song to the Lord, and they spoke, I will sing unto the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously, the horse and rider thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and song, and he has become my Yeshua. That's the Hebrew word for salvation, Yeshua. Now what's interesting is in Hebrew, it really isn't then sang. It's in the future. It's will sing. This is why we also see in Revelation a song of Moses. Okay, there's a will sing as well. It's the song of redemption that not only was sung back then, but will be sung again in the future. Now, as I said, there in Jewish commentaries, they say it was on the 7th day after leaving Egypt that the nation of Israel arrived at the Red Sea. Pharaoh and his army rode their chariots toward them. God performs a miracle. The sea splits open. Israel walks through on dry ground and reaches the other side. And it says, and then the Torah describes this outburst of song. It's then that they sang. In other words, it was at that precise moment. Now, let me show you something here. Look at Leviticus 23, 5 through 8. Let's tie in the history here. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, in the evening is the Jewish Passover. No, it's the Lord's Passover. Okay, it's not Israel Passover. It's not Jewish Passover. It's the Lord's Passover. Then on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread to the Lord. And look at this. 7 days you're to eat unleavened bread. The first day is a Sabbath, and don't do any regular work. You're to make an offering made by fire to the Lord 7 days. And the 7th day is also a Sabbath, and you're not to do any work. So there it is. So you can have 4 Sabbaths in 1 week. Now, I want to show you something. Let's do a quick review. Here we are. Passover. It was that evening on the 14th. Right before the 15th, they put the blood on the doorpost. Boom. Then you have the Feast of Unleavened Bread on the 15th. That's when they took off. They're headed. And the 15th is a Sabbath. And Moses has everybody walking, carrying burdens on the Sabbath. And then we go through the 20th. And then finally, it was the Red Sea on a Sabbath day. They also were made free. Okay, now I am going to make you understand a little bit better the Gospels. Here we are. We're in a synagogue on the Sabbath day, and there's a man with a withered hand. And listen to Mark chapter 3, verse 1 through 6. He entered again into the synagogue. There was a man there who had his hand withered, and they watched him whether Yeshua would heal him on a Sabbath day, that they might accuse him. And he said to the man who had his hand withered, stand up. And he said to them, Yeshua says to the religious leaders, is it lawful on the Sabbath day to do good or to do harm, to save a life or to kill? But they were like deer in the headlights. They didn't know what to say. And when he had looked around at them with anger, being grieved at what? The hardness of their heart, he said to the man, stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored as healthy as the other. So now the Pharisees go out, immediately conspired with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him. Oh my goodness, what makes them so ticked off that they'd want to kill Yeshua for healing the guy? It's the undertone. They wanted to convict him according to Moses. And it's on the Sabbath. And who do you discuss on the Sabbath? Moses, the Torah. And so Yeshua said, oh, you want to play that game? Okay, fine. You get to be the hard-hearted Egyptians. You're over there. The man with the withered hand is the nation of Israel, or Moses. And Yeshua says, and guess what? I'm God, and I'm telling the man with the withered hand who's playing Moses to stretch forth your hand. So all of a sudden, they get what he's doing. Wow, Yeshua, you're playing the role of God. That's why we want to kill you. You're telling this man with the withered hand to stretch forth your hand. He's playing Israel, and you're making us be the hard-hearted Egyptians. That's why they were so upset at him. Okay, this is huge. So you can, when you understand the story, then you see what's happening. You can make these connections. This is why they wanted him destroyed. Okay, let's go to Exodus. Oh, and I want to point out what else he was saying was, hey, look, you want to know what Moses has to say? Moses had him carrying a burden on the Sabbath. Moses healed the whole nation on the Sabbath by having them walk through the Red Sea. So you're trying to tell me, guess what? You can do both on the Sabbath. That's what I did. I killed the Egyptians, and I brought life to Israel, both on the Sabbath day. Amazing. So he was throwing Moses right back at them, and the Lord as well. Okay, so Exodus 15:20. Here we have Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of who? How come it doesn't say Moses? She was Moses' sister also. How come I left Moses completely out here? How come she's the sister of Aaron? Well, because Aaron's the firstborn. All right. And she took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. Okay, how old is Miriam? Here, Miriam, she's got the timbrel, and all the ladies are following them, and they're dancing that the Egyptians have been thrown into the sea. Well, guess what? She's the firstborn of the lady. So Moses is 80, Aaron is 83. She's probably close to 85 years old, and she's got a timbrel, and she's dancing out there. And what's amazing, and they say what faith she had and the other ladies had, that they brought timbrels to sing and dance. Can you imagine if you've got either a hurricane coming or you have a fire coming, and you only have a few minutes to get packed and leave, and they grab timbrels? I mean, it's amazing. Actually, they had a little bit more time, and I'm going to show you that when I explain something to you that is mind-blowing here in a little bit. Okay, Exodus 16:2 and 3. It says, the whole congregation of the children of Israel, what are they doing again? Murmuring against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said to them this time, would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt. And God says, I can arrange that, When we sat by the flesh pots, when we ate bread to the full, you brought us into this wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger. Here they think God brought them out just to kill them. What a horrible attitude. I always say it's okay to whine and complain, but at least wait till you have the facts. Make sure you have something to whine and complain about. They don't even try to go to God and say, oh, hey, God, what's going on? Let's reason together here. We are hungry. We're human, But no, they got to whine and complain. And so in Exodus 16:4, I don't think I had this on your notes. Did I? Okay. I want you to add, listen to this. This is the next verse. Exodus 64. And so what does the Lord tell Moses? Behold, I'm going to cause to rain bread from heaven for you. The people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day. So that means every day they could go out, and how much could they gather? 1 day's portion. And God says, because I'm going to prove them to see if they're going to listen to me or not. Okay. Why only a day's portion? Aren't you supposed to be ready for a rainy day? What's wrong with storing up more than 1 day, God? I mean, you're going to give it to us every day anyway. Why don't you just have it all come down on Monday? We'll all go grab it, and we'll just hold on to it, and, we'll manage it for 6 days. How many of you ever heard of the Our Father? Give us this day our daily bread. The reason why God only gave him a daily portion of bread is because he loves his kids and he wants to see them every day. If he gives them more, they more than likely he won't see them until it runs out. Isn't that interesting? God wanted to keep the connection between them and him, so he gives them enough to last a day, and then they have to come back to him and ask for more. If he gives them a whole bunch all at once, he won't see them for 6 days. I think that's an incredible thing to think about. What happened to the manna the following day? It would turn rancid. If they tried to store any up, it would turn ugly. Well, when we focus on hoarding wealth, it also can turn into something spiritually ugly. When we cling to material things, we no longer need to rely on God because we can now rely on ourselves. And that's why Yeshua warned us, I tell you, it's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Why? Because they become too self-reliant. They don't need God. God, I'll see you in a year when I need you. God wants to keep the connection with us. So in Exodus 16, 25 through 29, Moses says, eat that today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. Did you hear that? Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you're to gather. 7th day is the Sabbath. In it there will be, how much? None. And it happened on the 7th day that some of the people went out together, and what? They found none. I'm going to give you another way of looking at that here in just a minute. And the Lord said to Moses, how long are you guys going to refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? Behold, because the Lord has given you the Sabbath, therefore he gives you on the 6th day the bread for 2 days. Everyone stay in his place. Let no one get out of his place on the 7th day. God wanted them to rest on the 7th day and have that be a whole day. They don't even have to go out and gather manna. They can just spend time with him. That's what he wanted. Now, here is what happened. Get a load of this. In general, people use the word to find something when it's referring to something that they lost. Right? But in this case, they did not lose the manna because there was no manna on Shabbat. So why does the Torah use the words they did not find it? Well, there's a story in the Midrash that tells us about 2 men, Dathan and Abiram, who had hoped that the people of Israel would not believe Moses when he told them that the manna would not come down on Shabbat. So they went out very early on the Shabbat morning and scattered manna of the double portion they had gathered on Friday, because it was supposed to last all through the Shabbat this time, and they scattered on the ground so they could have people come and look and find the manna and prove Moses is a liar. That's why it says they did not find it, because they were told there was some out there. And so they go out to look and they could find none. Why? How many of you know this last Thursday was Tu B'Shavat? It's all about the birds and the trees. You're supposed to feed the birds. It always happens this weekend. And guess what happened? They say birds came and ate the manna before the people could come out and see it. And so they were proved to be the liars. Isn't that amazing? Okay, that's why it says they could not find it, because some people had thrown some manna out that wouldn't be destroyed that day. And the birds got it. Exodus 17. Now there's no water. How many of you know you have to have water? It says there's no water for the people to drink. So the people are chiding with Moses, give us water that we can drink. And Moses said to them, why are you chiding with me? You're tempting the Lord. The people thirsted there for water, and the people murmurs again against Moses and said, why is this that you brought us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and cattle with thirst? Well, that word there implies all night. Can you imagine? You're trying to sleep in your tent all night long, and you have a crowd of people outside your tent keeping you awake, murmuring, we want water, Moses. We want water. Moses is freaking out. In the morning, he cries out to God, they're going to stone me. What am I supposed to do? Look at this, Exodus 17, 4-8. Moses cries out to the Lord, what am I supposed to do to these people? They're ready to stone me. And the Lord said to Moses, go out before the people and take with you of the elders of Israel and your rod, which you smote the river with. Okay. I can see Moses, he's here in his tent. He doesn't want to get out. He's going to get stoned. So he sticks out the rod. Get back, you guys. Get back. Oh, it's the rod. And they all back up. And then he says, I want you to go before the rock in Horeb, and I want you to smite the rock, and water will come out. And everyone is now happy. And then look at the closing part of this verse. Now, it says that they were tempting the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? Then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. I tell you what, murmuring and whining and complaining will always bring you an Amalek experience. That's what we have to understand. In Exodus 17, 15, and 16, Moses built an altar, called the name of it Jehovah Nissi, God is my banner. And he said, because the Lord has sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. What does that mean? That means two things to me. One, in every generation, there will be a nation who wants to destroy the Jewish people, just like Hitler and Germany. Now it's Iran. And in every generation, there's an Amalek. In other words, God's going to have war with Amalek in every generation. That also means in every generation, there's going to be whiners and complainers. Okay, with that said now, I'm going to share something with you, if I can go a few minutes longer, that is mind-blowing. How long did the plagues last? Here, we've just entered the time of the plagues. Okay, does anybody have a guess how long the plagues last from when Moses smote the Nile and it turned to blood until they left Egypt? How long did the time of the plagues last? Any idea? I tell you right now, if you go and Google it, nobody knows. They'll say 1 year, they'll say 10 months, 6 months, 2 months, and they say it can't be found in the scripture, we don't know. Okay? I've heard it 10 years. They're all a year for each plague, whatever. Well, I'm here to tell you, I've discovered exactly how long it took. And it is in your Bible. And it is hiding in plain sight. Are you ready? I am going to show you exactly the time frame of the plagues. Are you ready? Here we go. First, let's do a review. We know the first year they're in Egypt, they have Passover, put the blood on the doorposts. 2 months later, the third month, Sivan, they have the first Shavuot or Pentecost, right? And then, what do? Moses goes up for 40 days, comes down on the 17th of Tammuz, and they're worshiping the golden calf. It's all big trouble. And so then he has to go back up another 40 days in the 6th month of Elul. And then in Tishri, he comes down after the 40 days on the Day of Atonement and says, all is forgiven. Here's the plans. Let's start building the tabernacle. So they start building the tabernacle. Does everyone agree with me that that's basically what it says? Now, we're going into the second year there in the wilderness. Here in Nisan, they have the big temple dedication. Nadab and Abihu, Aaron's sons, are killed before offering strange fire. Then we have Iyar, and they celebrate the second Passover. That brings us to the third month, Sivan. They celebrate Shavuot, Pentecost again. And then in Tammuz, this time, they send the spies to spy out the land for 40 days. They come back in the 5th month, the month of Av, with the evil report. And so then God says, you have to wander for 40 years. Does everyone agree with me that that's there? Now, my question for you is, since it was halfway through the second year that God told them they had to wander for 40 years, did that first year be included in the 40 years of wandering? Or was it 41 years? Okay. Well, I can tell you right now, it was 40 years. God, in his kindness, allowed that year. They've already been wandering as part of the 40. Okay. But now, what about the plagues? Was the plagues part of the wilderness wandering? Okay, the plagues happened before they left Egypt. Was the time of the plagues part of the wandering? So the big question is, here we are on the biblical calendar, and we have the plagues. When did the plagues happen? That is the big question. Okay, let's take a look at some verses. Let me see where I'm at here. Oh, yeah. Here we go. We know Moses and Aaron, when they appeared before Pharaoh, Moses was 80, Aaron was 83. We also find Moses died when he was 120. And we also see Aaron died. You're going to see the scriptures. He died when he was 123. What's 120 minus 80? It's not hard. 40. Okay. So let's take a look at some Bible verses here. It says so we also know we have a complete cycle of Passovers to Passover. They left on Passover, and 40 years later, they crossed the Jordan at Passover. Okay, so it's a complete yearly cycle for 40 cycles. All right, let's look at Exodus 12:6. It says, you shall keep the Passover it says you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month, referring to the Passover lamb that they got on the 10th of Nisan. Okay, remember, they got the Passover lamb on the 10th of Nisan, and then they had to hold it for 4 days, it says here, until the 14th day. And then the whole assembly, the congregation, kills the Passover in the evening. They take the blood, they put it on the doorposts. Okay, so everyone knows that Passover happened on the 14th day of Nisan, right? Okay, now let's look at Joshua 5:10. Here we go. It says the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal. They kept the Passover on what? The 14th day of the month, and even in the plains of Jericho. Okay, so here we are. We see that it was a complete cycle, Passover to Passover. Now, there's some things we have to realize. You're going to see that, and I'm just going to introduce it, and then I'm going to prove it, that it was on Nisan 10 that they crossed the Jordan 40 years later and went into the wilderness. I'm also going to show you a verse that Joshua warns everybody, we're going to cross the Jordan in 3 days. So if they're going to cross the Jordan in 3 days and they crossed on Nisan 10, what day did he give the warning? Nisan 7. I'm also going to show you the verse where the children of Israel mourned Moses' death. It says for 30 days. So I made this little cemetery stone. Moses meets his maker on Adar 7. Because if you take Nisan 7 and you subtract 30 days, what does that take you to? Adar 7. Does that make sense? Is everyone following me? Let's look at this little graph here. Okay, here we go. They crossed the Jordan on the 10th of Nisan, which means they had the warning on the 7th of Nisan, which means they mourned Moses' death 30 days earlier, which is on the 7th of Adar. Does everybody see that? I'm also going to show you that Moses' birthday was on the same day he died. He not only died on Adar 7, he was also born on Adar 7. Okay, so now watch this here. Let's see. Numbers 14, 33 and 34. It says, your children shall wander in the wilderness for how many years? 40 years. And bear your whoredoms until your carcasses are wasted in the wilderness. After the number of days in which you search the land, even 40 days, each day a year, you will bear your iniquities, even 40 years, and you will know my breach of promise. All right. So now, what facts do we know as far as when the plagues began? All right. Well, first off, look at this. Exodus 7, verse 7 and 8. Here's the proof of what I just showed you. Moses was what? 80 years old, And Aaron was 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. That means they were 80 and 83 before the plagues, which means the plagues had to be part of the 40-year experience because they died at 120. Okay? Now, let me show you. Let me see where I'm at here. Okay. All right. So now, look at this. Let me bring up this little slide here. Here we see, how many of you know the Passover happened on Nisan 14 going into Nisan 15? Did Passover happen in July? Did Passover happen in December? No. Passover, it couldn't have happened in Tammuz. Passover couldn't have happened in Tishri. Passover, we know we have a hard stop. We have a hard stop. The Passover had to end at Passover. It couldn't have gone beyond it, right? Now, Moses, I have 80 BP. That's before plagues. And he died 120 at death. Did the plagues begin when Moses was 79? No. He had to be 80. So we have a minimum stop as well. The earliest hard stop is Moses' 80th birthday, which we now know was on Adar 7. And we know the hard stop is Passover. And because in Nisan 10, we see in Joshua 4, 18 and 19 is when they crossed. Nisan 14, 15 is when they kept the Passover 40 years later. So what that tells us is all the plagues had to happen within a 5-week time frame between Moses' birthday and the Passover. It couldn't have happened any other time. So that means all the plagues happened within a 5-week time frame. Now watch. Again, I'm going to show you. Look at this. Deuteronomy 1:3. Let's follow. Right here it says, let me see if I put that verse in here. Oh, I don't have it in here. Oh, here it is, yeah. Deuteronomy 1:3. Again, it came to pass in the 40th year, the 11th month, on the first day of the month. That's the first of Shabbat. So I have in the picture of Moses, Deuteronomy 1:3. It's Shabbat 1. He's giving his farewell speech, okay? And then look at the next verse. I'm going to put up this next picture. Here we have Moses dies, okay? Deuteronomy 34, verse 7 and 8. Look what it says. First, let's start with Deuteronomy 31:2. Okay? I'm going to pick this up. Moses goes and speaks to all of Israel, and he said, guess what? Today's my birthday. I'm 120 years old this day. I can't go anymore out and in. And the Lord told me I can't go over Jordan. Okay, and then look at Deuteronomy 34, 7 and 8. Moses was how old when he died? Why? Because he was born on his birthday. This tells us he died on his birthday. And then they mourned for 30 days. Okay, and then we see Joshua gives a 3-day notice. First off, let's go to Joshua 1:2. They mourned Moses for 30 days. And it says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass, the Lord says to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, hello, Moses has been dead for 30 days. Time to move on. You know, it's going to the promised land. You and all the people, which I give them. So look at Joshua 1:10. Here it is. Joshua commanded the officers of the people, pass through the host, command the people, prepare you victuals, and for within how many days? So if they crossed on Nisan 10, we see that in the next verse, Joshua 4, 18 and 19. It came to pass when the priests that bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord were come out of the midst of Jordan, the soles of the priests' feet were lifted up on the dry land. The waters of the Jordan returned to their place and flowed all over all of its banks as they did before, just like, see, at the original Passover with the Red Sea. And the people came up out of the Jordan on what day? The 10th day of the first month. Okay, so what do we see here? Again, it's on Shabbat 1, Deuteronomy 1:3. The entire book of Deuteronomy happens within 37 days because he dies on the 7th of Adar. So here we see Joshua crosses the Jordan on the 10th of Nisan. That's Joshua 4, 18 and 19. And so let me summarize it this way, and we have this handout for you on the table over here. Here's how I see all the plagues happening. I believe it was on his birthday when he appeared before Pharaoh and threw his rod before Pharaoh, and it became a serpent or a crocodile, however you want to look at it. And then it says, and I have for you every Bible verse that tells you how it progresses this way on the chart. You'll see in Exodus 7:15, God had told Moses after the whole rod becoming the serpent, hey, tomorrow morning go see Pharaoh out of the river and turn the water to blood. So that's why it's the next day. And then you read that the blood in the Nile lasted for 7 days. So I have it for 7 days. I think it's interesting. The last day is Purim historically, which I thought was kind of fascinating. But anyway, and then it says on the next day, go to Pharaoh, turn everything to all the frogs. And you'll see in Exodus 8:1, when Moses asked Pharaoh, when do you want the frogs to leave? He goes, oh, how about tomorrow? Okay, fine. So he leaves the frogs there, and they, on 16th of Adar, the frogs are finally thrown in the river. Okay, then I guess you got a couple days of repentance. You have the lice on the 19th of Adar, Exodus 8:16, and Pharaoh doesn't repent of the lice. I guess they lasted the whole time. And so the next day, Exodus 8:20, we see the flies come, and then he goes to Pharaoh and says, when do you want the flies to leave? He goes, how about tomorrow? Okay, so I got the flies there, Exodus 8:29, and then God tells Moses, go over to Pharaoh. So on the 22nd of Adar, I have Moses before Pharaoh, Exodus 9:1, and God tells Moses to tell Pharaoh, tomorrow the cattle will die. Okay, so the next day I have the upside down cattle, they're dead. That's Exodus 9:5. That brings us to the boils, Exodus 9:8. And then Exodus 9:13 through 18, God tells Moses, why don't you go back to Pharaoh, let him know the lice are coming. And Exodus 9:24, you see the lice. Oh, that's the fire and hail I meant. The hail with fire comes. That's Exodus 9:24 on the 26th of Adar. And then Exodus 10:1, the 27th of Adar, he says, hey, go back and give Pharaoh another message that tomorrow the locusts are going to come. And so you see the locusts in Exodus 10:14. And then Exodus 10:21 through 23 is when he goes before Pharaoh, and he says there's going to be 3 days of darkness that can even be felt. Well, what's fascinating, Nisan 1, it was those 3 days that were the times of darkness, and that's when the moon is also the darkness at its darkest point. And when God told Moses, this moon, this month will be the time to you. And he says he showed him the sliver of the moon, which I believe happened during the 3 days of darkness. Then, of course, the following week, it's time to go ask all of the Egyptians if they could borrow some stuff. Okay, so then they took a week to borrow some things. And then on the 10th of Nisan, Moses was told to have everyone grab a lamb and hold it for 4 days. And then on the 14th of Nisan, they slew the lamb, put it on the doorpost, and it was at midnight, Exodus 12:29, that the firstborn all died. And then the next day, they packed their bags and off they went. But you can see plainly the plagues. Now, if you want to get a bare minimum, probably 3 weeks. If you count one plague was 7 days, the 3 days of darkness is 10 days. There's 8 other plagues. That's 18 days. But there was like 3 days when he says go the next day. So the absolute minimum of all the plagues happening is 3 weeks. But more than likely, I believe it was spread out over these 5 weeks. But it wasn't months. It wasn't a year. It was 5 weeks. And right here now, you have the tools to show everybody that you know the answer to how long the plagues lasted. Amen. Fasten your seat belts. We're going for another ride. Last week, we were in Daniel 7. This week, we start Daniel 8. But in Daniel 7, verses 1 through 3, we saw it was the first year of Belshazzar. And in other words, about 67 years have gone by for Daniel, and we haven't heard from Daniel. We haven't heard a word from Daniel. He interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dream. That was it. Nothing's been heard for 67 years. So he's more than likely in his 80s. But it was in the first year of Belshazzar, the king of Babylon. Now Daniel sees a dream, and the visions came into his head on his bed. Then he put the dream in writing And he says, I had a vision by night, and I saw the four winds of heaven violently moving the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, different from one another. Okay, now if you remember last week, I had the sea and I had the little beasts popping up out of the sea. And if you remember, 67 years earlier, he had the vision of, well, Nebuchadnezzar had the dream and the vision, and Daniel had it. God gave him it so he could interpret it, okay, because Nebuchadnezzar wouldn't tell him the dream or the vision. So Daniel had the exact same dream vision that Nebuchadnezzar had, telling him about the four kingdoms. Is everyone familiar with the four kingdoms, right? Okay. Now, get a load of this. Now we're coming to Daniel chapter 8. This is the third year of Belshazzar. Okay, he had this dream in the first year that we read about last week, Daniel 7. Now it's the third year, which is also the final year of Belshazzar. He doesn't last more than 3 years. And now what is happening in the third year is the last year, and he has this vision, another one, confirming what he saw the first year. Okay, but I want you to notice this. Look at Daniel 8 as we begin, verse 1 through 4. It says it's now the third year. So we can see Daniel 7 was the first. Daniel 8 is the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar. A vision appeared to me, even unto me, Daniel. I can see Daniel so humble. He can't believe that he had a vision. You know, like, oh my goodness. Compare that to Nebuchadnezzar. God appeared to me, you know. But he goes, I can't believe it. Now look at what it says. That when I saw, I was where? Where was he? In Shushan. What do we remember about Shushan? That's the whole Purim, Esther. Take a look at this map. Shushan is in Iran. Babylon is in Babylon. Okay. It's about a 5-6 hour drive. Okay. So how long is it going to take to walk? How long is it going to take to ride a camel or a donkey? I'm telling you, it is 6 hours from Shushan to Babylon. Okay, where is King Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, is in where? Babylon. But where is Daniel in the third year of Belshazzar? Okay, why? Belshazzar doesn't know who he is any more than a 30-year-old would know who an 80-year-old is from another country. Daniel's been sidelined. Nebuchadnezzar and him were good friends, but after Nebuchadnezzar goes, you have evil Merodach, Neriglissar, Nabonidus, you know, Belshazzar, he has no idea who this Daniel is. Daniel's been moved clear over to Shushan. So that's where Daniel is. Now, he says, I was in Shushan, the castle, which is in the province of Elam, that's Iran, and I saw in the vision. Oh, let me take a look at this map. I have one other thing to show you. If you look at Shushan real close, right there, it says the tomb of Daniel. Daniel's tomb is over there. That's where it is. Okay. Now, let me bring up this. As I said, Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel 1, 2, 3, and 4 are in order. Daniel 1, Nebuchadnezzar takes Daniel and Shaddai, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel 2 and 3 is the second year of Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel 4, we see judgment upon Nebuchadnezzar. 67 years go by. That brings us to Daniel 7, and then 8, and then you read chapter 5. Okay, so Daniel 7 is the first year of Belshazzar. That is when Daniel has his vision of the lion, the bear, the leopard with 4 wings, and this horrible monster. Daniel 8 and 5 are both the third and last year of Belshazzar. And in the third year, this is what we're going to look at today. He has the vision of the ram, the goat, the 4 horns, and the notable horn. And then Daniel 5 is the last year of Belshazzar, and the handwriting is on the wall. Now, if we remember, Nebuchadnezzar, about 70 years earlier, had the vision of this image. And then Daniel received it, and he interpreted that the gold head represented Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon. The 2 arms of silver represented the Medes and the Persians. And then Greece was represented, by the bronze torso. Now, we know in that first dream he had, Babylon was represented by a lion. Medes and Persians was represented by a bear. And Greece was represented by a leopard that ended up having 4 wings, which had to refer to the 4 generals, of Alexander the Great that his kingdom was divided into. Now, because the Babylonian kingdom is about to end, he's in the 3rd year of Belshazzar, He's now reminded, and they don't start with Babylon. This dream starts with the Medes and the Persians, the 2-horned ram. It's the same story, but in a different scenario. And then the Greece is represented by the goat that has this notable horn in the middle. That is Alexander the Great. So is everyone following me? I want you to realize all these dreams are the same thing. And so he's realizing, even before Belshazzar sees the handwriting on the wall that his reign is over, Daniel's seeing his reign is over. He already knows before the handwriting was on the wall, because he's the one who had the dreams and the visions. In Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and then the one in the 1st year, now the one in the 3rd year. But he's clear over there in Shushan. Well, guess what? He ends up traveling all the way over to Babylon, because he's in Babylon when the handwriting is on the wall. So here we go. We see that he was in Shushan the castle, which is in the province of Elam. I saw in the vision, and I was by the stream of Ulai. One thing that's interesting, all of Daniel's visions and in Ezekiel's, they're by a river of water, because a river of water, in one sense, purifies the place where they're at. That's why it's always by a body of water. Now, we know previously that the bear represented Persia, or one of the arms. And here we're going to see here that one of the ram's horn is Medes and the other is Persia. All right, but let's look at this. Here he says, by the stream of Ulai, and I lifted up my eyes, and I saw, and behold, there stood before the stream a ram, which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. Well, guess what? Persia was a lot higher than the Medes. The Medes didn't last very long at all, like 1 year, and then the Persians. But I want you to know right now, the Medes and the Persians were intertwined family-wise as well. I will show you that, I believe, next week.
Thank you for joining with us. We hope you learned something new today. Please partner with us in fulfilling the scriptures about taking God's Torah to the nations. You can watch this whole program for free, along with all of our other archive programs right from our website link shown below. We hope to see you soon at our location right here in Tacoma, Washington. See you soon.